Hi, boys and girls. It's Miss Kelly, and today we are going to be talking about figurative language, and we're going to be talking about a specific type of figurative language that is called hyperbole. And you may have heard of it before, or when I explain what it is, you're going to say, "Oh, I know what that is." Okay, so we're going to talk about hyperbole, which is a type of figurative language. And this little cartoon shows a hyperbole. Does anybody know what that shows? It's raining cats and dogs. That phrase is a hyperbole. Okay, first let's talk about what figurative language is. And figurative language is writing or speech that's not meant to be taken literally. Literally means exactly what the words say, okay? Figurative language, it means that it means kind of something different than exactly what the words say. So for example, in raining cats and dogs, that does not mean that there are literally cats and dogs falling from the sky, although some of us would probably love that because we love cats and dogs, but it just means that it's raining really hard. So that expression, we don't take that expression literally. Okay, it has a figurative meaning. So writers use figurative language to express ideas in vivid or imaginative ways. It adds interest to writing. So some examples of figurative language that you might be familiar with are, she's the apple of my eye. That means that she's a person I like a lot, right? The apple of my eye doesn't literally mean there's an apple in your eye. It means she's the person that I really like. Don't be a couch potato, right? That doesn't literally mean don't turn into a potato on the couch. It just means don't lay around all day, right? And the last one is boom. The cannon blasted across the battlefield. That word boom is what's called an onomatopoeia, and that's another type of figurative language. That's a noise word. So when you read that word, you can almost imagine the boom sound happening, right? It's the sound of the cannon. So in this little cartoon, it's Mama Potato Head, the Mr. Potato Head, don't roll your eyes at me, young man. And he's literally rolling his eyes across the floor at her, right? He's taking it literally when she means it figuratively, like when somebody rolls their eyes, right? Okay, there's a lot of different types of figurative language, and some of them you may have learned about before, you may be familiar with. Simile, metaphor. Today we're going to talk about hyperbole, understatement. You might be familiar with that one. Onomatopoeia, which is the one that I just talked about, that was the boom. Alliteration, personification, and idiom. And we'll be talking about some of these other types of figurative language in other lessons. So today we're going to be talking about hyperbole. And hyperbole is like extreme exaggeration. It's used to make a point. And it uses language to describe something that really couldn't happen, but it kind of gets the point across. So hyperbole is meant to evoke strong feelings or create a strong impression with the reader. And as a figure of speech, it is not usually meant to be taken literally. So, two examples of hyperbole that you may be familiar with are, it was so hot you could fry an egg on the sidewalk, right? It doesn't literally mean go out and put an egg on the sidewalk and fry it. It just means that it's really, really hot out. Another one is, he walked down the hallway as slow as molasses. Molasses are a really thick, dark brown kind of liquid that you use in baking. And when you take it out, it kind of drips off the spoon really, really slow. So as slow as molasses, it just means that you're doing something very, very slowly. It doesn't mean that the boy is literally molasses. It just means that he's moving very slowly. So authors a lot of times will use hyperbole for dramatic effect in a story, and to help make the reader understand better what's going on. And also it kind of adds a little interest. It can be a little fun to read. So there is Garfield, and it says, "I told you 100 times to clean up your room." So if you've ever heard a grown-up at home say, "I told you 100 times," right? Maybe it is literal that they told you 100 times, but usually it just means that they've told you many times to do something, and they're kind of using that "I told you 100 times" as a hyperbole. So over here in this little chart, it is a figurative language chart. The type of figurative language that we're talking about today is hyperbole. And it says that it exaggerates detail for dramatic or humorous or funny effect. And when you read hyperbole, you can ask yourself, is this statement realistic? Okay, could this really happen? If not, it might be hyperbole. And the example in the little cartoon was, "I've told you 1,000,000 times." It doesn't literally mean that the person has said something 1,000,000 times. It just means they've told you a lot. One of the most common uses of hyperbole is in tall tales. And you may be familiar with some tall tales. You may have read them before. And tall tales have exaggerated characters who can do unusual things. They're not very realistic. They're not something that could happen in real life. So the stories about these types of characters are full of hyperbole. Okay, there's a lot of hyperbole in tall tales. So I don't know if you're familiar with any of these characters here that are the subject of some tall tales. We have Pecos Bill down here. He's riding the tornado and he has a lasso. Davy Crockett. Davy Crockett was a real person, but the kind of the tale that is told about him is a lot of hyperbole. Paul Bunyan and his ox, his blue ox, Babe, and Johnny Appleseed. Those are all examples of tall tales. Okay, authors use hyperbole for dramatic effect on a text, and to also help the reader understand what's going on, to add interest to the story, as we said before. They're kind of fun to read. It really gets the point across to the reader. It really kind of hits home the point that the author is trying to express. Okay, here's a little cartoon about hyperbole. And this is sort of like a superhero character whose name is Hyperbole. So let's see.
My bag weighs a ton. I had to wait in the station for 10 days, an eternity. I'm so hungry, I could eat a horse. Yeah. I know you heard of me. The best figure of speech, hands down, hyperbole. I'm the one that similes yearn to be. I'm brighter than an Ivy University. I'm used universally, well maybe not quite. It might not be true, but it sure sounds nice. John Henry and Paul Bunyan both owe me a little something. Words have a literal meaning when they mean exactly what they say. And words have a figurative meaning when there's something more that they want to convey. That's me. I exaggerate, I make it seem bigger, better, more. I've been known to tell a tall tale or two, just to leave them in stitches like tailors do. Yeah, I pop up in pop-up ads and the cover of supermarket rags. No, the truth never bothered me. I'm hyper speed, hyperbole. Babe, the big blue ox could eat in one day all the feed one crew could toast to camp in a year. That's me. Hyperbole, exaggerate for effect, certainly. Build intensity and urgency, hyperbole. I know you heard of me, not hyperbole, exaggerate for effect, certainly. Build intensity and urgency, hyperbole. I know you heard of me. Now why in the world would all these folks use me in their writing, speaking, and shows? Authors can use hyperbole to emphasize the stature and the size of these characters, so they come alive. Take Johnny Appleseed, a real guy who walked barefoot a lot, okay? So his feet were calloused, and they say if a rattlesnake bit his feet, that snake would die immediately. Ha! That's hyperbole, used to convey Johnny's toughness, see? Or ask any preteen, certainly. Hyperbole conveys urgency. If I don't get to go to the mall tonight, I'm literally going to die. Not literally, but is it a lie when it shows how Nikki feels inside? marketers use it all the time to get you to buy and buy and buy. World's best pizza, and yet did they conduct an actual test, pitting that pizza against all the rest to crown that slice as the global best? Nah, they are being hyperbolic, just trying to get what's in your wallet. When you see those claims, you are seeing me exaggerating for effect, hyperbole. You've got a smile that could light up this whole town. That's my girl Taylor. Yeah. That's me. Hyperbole, hyperbole, exaggerate for effect, certainly. Build intensity and urgency. Hyperbole, I know you heard of me. Not hyperbole, hyperbole, exaggerate for effect, certainly. Build intensity and urgency. Hyperbole, I know you heard of me. Hyperbole, hyperbole, exaggerate for effect, certainly. Build intensity and urgency. Hyperbole, I know you heard of me. Not hyperbole, hyperbole, exaggerate for effect, certainly. Build intensity and urgency. Hyperbole, I know you heard of me.
Okay.
My bag weighs.
Okay, so now we're going to read two poems and explore how and why the authors used hyperbole in the poems. Okay, remember that hyperbole is a type of figurative language. It's not meant to be taken literally, and it exaggerates details, and it describes something that probably couldn't happen in real life. Okay, this poem is called I Once Caught a Fish. My dad and I went fishing. The whole time I was wishing to catch a big fish. I cast out my line just in time. I got a bite. I pulled it over my shoulder. It was bigger than a boulder from the Grand Canyon. Its head was larger than a swimming pool. Man, this is going to look cool in my picture. Did you find the hyperbole in that poem? So sometimes it's said that when people go fishing, they exaggerate about the size of the fish that they caught. So can you find where hyperbole is used here? So when he says it was bigger than a boulder from the Grand Canyon, is that possible? Would catching a fish bigger than a boulder from the Grand Canyon be possible? No. Its head was larger than a swimming pool. Is that possible? No. The person is exaggerating to kind of make the fish that they caught sound bigger than it actually is. They're using hyperbole to make a point and to brag a little bit. Okay, this poem is called My Dad is Tougher Than Your Dad. My dad is tougher than your dad. He wrestles alligators every morning just to get his heart pumping. Instead of eating toasted coffee for breakfast, he eats the toaster and the coffee maker. He doesn't drive to work. He runs to work 10 miles a day. When he gets home from work, he relaxes in a hot bath of boiling water. He prefers chewing nails to chewing gum. And when he sees someone for the first time, he says, "Hello, nice to meet you." So loud and fearsome, people run away and hide. My dad is tougher than your dad. So, did you see any examples of hyperbole or extreme exaggeration in this poem? What do you think the point the person's trying to get across, right? The person's trying to say that they think their dad is pretty tough, right? But they're using some lines that we know are not real, that could never really happen. Like wrestling alligators every morning. No, probably not true. Eating a toaster and a coffee maker for breakfast. That's not possible. Running to work 10 miles a day. That sounds a little bit unrealistic to me. I know some people run a lot, but running to work 10 miles would be kind of hard. Relaxes in a hot bath of boiling water. No, that would probably cause a really bad burn. Chewing nails to chewing gum. Not possible. and saying hello in a voice that's so loud and fearsome people run away and hide. Again, an extreme exaggeration. So this person is using a whole lot of hyperbole to say how great they think their dad is. So hyperbole is often used to make a point. And like in this poem, it's kind of funny because we know that these things are completely outlandish. And sometimes little children will say things like this, when they're talking to each other, my dad's tougher than your dad. They may say some things like this, but we know that these things are not really possible or true. Okay, so you have 2 assignments to do today. Your first assignment is an ed puzzle where you're going to listen to a tall tale. Remember, we talked about tall tales. This tall tale is called Thunder Rose, and it's by Jardine Nolan. So you're going to watch the video, and as you're watching the video, it's going to periodically stop and ask you some questions. You cannot fast forward. You can go back, but you can't go forward. So you're going to have to watch the entire video to answer the questions. And while you're watching to Thunder Rose, listen to see if you catch any examples of hyperbole. So remember, hyperbole is extreme exaggeration used to make a point. And ask yourself, could this be true? Is this statement realistic? And your assignment number 2 is a Google form that you're going to do that's going to ask you to decide whether or not some sentences are hyperbole or not hyperbole. And then you're going to get a chance to write 2 hyperboles of your own. So you're going to go back to Google Classroom, look under today's date in the classwork tab, and do assignment 1, which is the ed puzzle, and assignment 2, which is the Google form. Okay, take your time, make sure you submit everything when you're finished. And good luck. If you have any questions, ask your teacher in your Google Classroom. Okay, see you next time.